Hey guys, it's John again here from Where Do We Grow Now? I'm here with Travis Davenport, founder of Wolf and Iron. Travis, thank you for joining me today.
Hey, John, thanks for having me on today. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, of course, man. I was excited to have you come on. When you have a brand name that's pretty, in its iron, actually verbatim, I was intrigued to learn about, the platform and what it is that you guys do and who you work with, some of the successes. So I guess in the best way to put it, tell myself and everyone listening who you are and what Wolf and Iron does.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. So, Wolf and Iron was born out of an opportunity that I had years and years and years ago because I've been in the nonprofit sector for nearly 20 years now, and had an opportunity with a small business owner who is trying to work through some of his core values, was having a really big problem with staff retention. And I had an opportunity to sit down and talk with him. He had overheard I was doing a training session with some of our leaders in one of our nonprofits that we had, and I had a meeting scheduled with him. He was outside the office, heard some of what we were taking them through, and he said, "Hey, could I actually pay you to come down and teach that same thing to our team?" I said, "Yeah, you don't have to pay me. I'll come down, you know." And then one visit turned into two visits turned into three, and then three turned into really what you see today, which is Wolf and Iron. And I mainly work with Wolf and Iron, work with CEOs, established entrepreneurs to help them gain, train, retain the best, employees on the market. And there's so much more that we do, but really that's at its core is how to develop an organization that has an uber clear vision, uber clear culture, a culture that is true to the business owner. Oftentimes, what I see is, I call it a subluxation. I don't know if you've ever been to a chiropractor before, but
Oh
a
yeah.
chiropractor will tell you you got a subluxation over here, and your back may hurt over here, but the issue is actually somewhere else. So actually finding out how to get to the right spot to massage that, to even it out, to address that, to correct that, so that the subluxation actually works out itself. And what happens is when we align the owner with their culture, or rather, I'm sorry, when we align the culture with the owner, right? Then what we have as a business owner, just your truest self, is breathing out the correct culture. And so oftentimes what I find with Wolf and Iron is that there's just a kink somewhere in the culture. I like to say you are your business, right? So as a business owner, the areas of unfulfillment in your business, those are subluxations. Those are areas where the culture doesn't match who you are as an owner. So one of two things has to change. The owner has to change, which that's probably not happening, or the culture needs to change, which is a difficult thing to do. And so there's a process that we work through to really work that out. But Wolf and Iron comes through this idea, the name of, really two forms. Number one, two facts. Number one, wolf, being this wolf pack. I think that we're all better when we're together. So we need to have a healthy wolf pack around us, people that are pushing us, pulling us in the correct manner, people that have our back. And then iron comes from, this ancient writing talking about iron sharpening iron. So we need to be also surrounded by people who are bettering us and we're bettering them, wolf and iron.
Wow. So did you see, for us, I like to relate to what we've been doing. And when COVID hit, we had our office culture, which was our South Florida office. And then we
Yeah,
went full remote and started to include other people from other parts of the country in
right,
that culture, right? So there
right.
was two challenges. There was challenge A, which was how do you maintain that camaraderie that we had in the office virtually now, where everyone's kind of going through what some unprecedented times for
Right.
many, and
Yeah.
then including other people from other areas of the country, and even sometimes a little bit beyond that too. So, did you notice a spike with brands needing that sort of realignment, massaging, as you put it,
Yeah, great
once that
question.
happened?
Yeah, great question. We really didn't, and I'll tell you why. Um, from the beginning, we've really made a distinction between internal culture, which would be staff culture, and then outward facing culture, which is how we relate, whether as an employee to a customer, an owner to another business, whatever it might be. we have our internal culture, and that's more that family culture. And I'm not trying to wash it over in just some type of an emotional way, but it really truly is a culture that's coming up out of the owner itself. And the outward facing culture, while it may be very similar to an internal culture, there's going to be some key components that are very different. In other words, an internal facing culture really deals with how we function as a team from the day to day. Case in point, I was working with a company, food truck, one of the largest, actually the largest food truck company here in Columbus, Ohio. And they had a great outward facing culture, but they were trying to take their outward facing culture and use it internally as and it wasn't working. It just didn't really make sense. So what we had to do is go inside and actually create an internal, an inward facing internal culture. And that, in all honesty, that really helped even change the out facing, right? The outward culture that happened. So to be straightforward with you, no, we really, with the companies that I've worked with, especially during COVID, if anything, we saw how important the detail was to the culture that was being created, and the more that we leaned into that, because look, COVID happened, the world went kaput, but these companies that had strong cultures, they were taking their customer base along with them. Now, to your point, John, it might have been in different facets, right? It might be remote, it might be virtual, it might be through a pane of glass. However, if there's a strong enough, and I use this word, relational currency, right? So think about it like if you look at everybody like a bank, which I know sounds horrible, right? But if you look at everybody like a bank, I have to make sure that I, as an owner, am investing money. I'm making deposits into my customers, because at some point or another, I'm probably going to make a withdrawal, whether that's intentional or unintentional. Maybe it's a messed up order, which we hate to see, but maybe that's going to be a withdrawal. But maybe it's something I'm gonna push them on, like I'm selling to them, like, hey, you really need to pick up some more orders here. We've been, short, blah blah blah. That's a withdrawal. As long as I have enough relational currency invested in that bank of individual, I'm gonna have enough to make a withdrawal. And so what we found in COVID was those customers, those clients that the owners had made a significant amount of relational investment in, they had plenty in the bank to pull from during that crisis mode.
Got it. So, kind of shifting gears a little bit, what was the, when I look at myself and my chronology of getting to this place of building and running Sama, I had about almost a decade of ecom and agency experience that I was applying to this. With
Sure.
you being able to talk to these, owner, operators, C-level people, and also internal teams, what stimulated you to be able to do this? What was it that was the catalyst that you said, you know what, I have this ability to really level with people and help them even out, these challenges that they're having,
Sure.
culturally or otherwise.
Sure. Well, I think I saw a gap in the market, right? A gap. What I saw was owner, CEO, established entrepreneur, whatever it is that fill in that category, and a level of unfulfillment that they were having versus the culture that they were creating. And I saw a gap there, and I thought, man, there's got to be some way to fill that gap. There's got to be some way to solve that issue. And so as I began working with more and more clients, I really discovered, as we talked about earlier, I really discovered that the points of discomfort or frustration were really areas within the owner that they had not yet ironed out. In other words, oftentimes I think we go for the cheap and easy, right? Or another way to say it is the cheap and dirty, right? We go for buzzwords and we say that's my value. My value is, timeliness, loyalty, compassion, whatever it is. And we go for those words. And those are great words. Those are great things. But if they don't match your personal architecture, then good things are bad things. And good, right, can be the enemy of yourself when it's not true, when it's not authentic. And so helping owners discover who they authentically are through a process, relatively short process, believe it or not, has really been this thing that's been, number one, fulfilling for me. And I would say very profitable for owners, because once you get those details ironed out, once you get those core values, that personal architecture established, then what happens from it is a culture that flows out of an authentic place within an owner. No long, I mean, look, we'd all love to be in a place where we love 100% of our job 100% of the time. That's not realistic. There's always going to be things that we don't enjoy doing in our job. For me, it's paperwork. I don't enjoy it, right? Now I can delegate it, and that makes it a little bit more enjoyable for me. Then I got to pay somebody to do it, which makes it a little bit less enjoyable for me. So we all have to make those decisions. But overall, what I had found was so many owners, founders, CEOs were working out of a place of just great unfulfillment in what they were doing. Look, they were making money, they were hiring employees, they were having massive turnover, which seems to be an epidemic in our country. And so, walking through this process with them seemed to be this. It just solves so many issues. Having a healthy culture, which is truly reflective of an authentic state of an owner.
Got it. What was it that, like, how did you know you had this ability to identify and then react with a solution that they can really rally around? Did you go to school for this? Like, what was it that, like, you're like, I have this
Yeah,
innate ability, or did it just dawn on you and you read a couple good books and you're like, well, shit, I could apply this to X,
right.
Y, and Z and make everyone's life a little bit less challenging?
Yeah, man, I wish it was that way. No, I would say it came out of probably about 15, 16 years of grinding it out in the nonprofit space. And here's what's interesting about
Got it.
nonprofit. It truly is nonprofit. So the people that are working for an organization, number one, they're not usually getting paid much, if anything. So they're not going to be sold on working for money, right? They're not there for the capital. What they're there for is the result. And so if you don't build a very strong community, a very strong culture, then you're just going to be turning over people all the time because you're asking them to do something for
Mhm.
basically nothing except the emotional fulfillment of what they're doing. And so for years and years, building this process where it's like, okay, how can I ask people to commit to do this, to volunteer? I would work with nonprofit leaders and they would say, man, how can I ask these people to do these things when I'm not paying them barely anything? Well, the answer is culture. One of the answers. They've got to be so sold out for the culture. And the thing is this, when you establish an authentic culture, it doesn't mean everybody's going to be drawn to it. In fact, the opposite. It could mean that a lot of people are going to be pushed away by it, but that's okay. Because in terms of demographics, the stronger and the more demonstrative my culture can be within any given organization, be it nonprofit or for profit, marketplace, whatever that might be, I'm going to attract like minded customers, like minded employees to this culture who are now not just going to have a one off buying situation, they're going to repeat buy. They're going to come back, they're going to want to stay. Oftentimes, customers are the ones who end up coming and working for the company because they see something different. They say, man, I love this place. I don't know what's
Mm.
different here, but I just want to be a part of it. Well, what that is culture and community. And so I would say after years and years of grinding that out, when you switch over to a for-profit space, it becomes, I don't want to say completely transferable, but those principles are so transferable in so many ways, plus the added benefit of being able to pay people. And what's happened as a result, by the way, John, is that when these companies build these cultures that are this strong, that are truly authentic, you get one of two results. Number one, I think about it like in terms of fish tanks. You got a freshwater tank, you got a saltwater tank. You take the same fish that can only live in a freshwater environment, and you put them in a saltwater tank, and what's going to happen? A, it's going to die, or B, it's going to fight to get out, right? But you take that same fish and put it in a freshwater tank, and now it's going to thrive in that culture. We want our cultures to be so strong that it's going to be freshwater or saltwater. So the employees that are going to really do well in that culture, they're going to remove themselves if they don't. They're going to fight it. And they're eventually going to eliminate themselves from that culture.
Mhm.
But in the same hand, we're going to be drawing in people that are going to benefit from that culture and really are going to take that culture to the next level.
Awesome. So I guess the next question I have would be more about summarizing a lot of what you said, because I know there's no direct answer to this, but it's more of, you know, there's a common denominator clearly with most businesses today in being able to navigate culture and just general, wellness and balance. I think balance is
Right.
another important word that I like to say, because there's only so many hours in a day, and I think people get very passionate about their work. However, they're not cognizant of the fact that, you know, at 10 o'clock at night, there's only so much you can do. Like as a
Right.
human being, there's nothing's going to change between 10 o'clock at night and then when the next day starts at 8 or 9 a.m.
Sure.
Nothing's going to change, right? So they have to be
Sure.
mindful. I think people just take things very personally, right? And then I think it's the leadership's job um, to help kind of realign them on where priorities should be, because people do
Yeah.
get lost and they do get kind of tunnel vision is the best way to put it, which then I think breeds the worst kind of burnout. I've seen it, I've been through it, so I can certainly speak to it. And what I like most is I feel like I have an ability to identify that pretty early on.
Mhm.
So, are there three identifiers that you typically ask CEOs, owners, operators to look for before you say, "Hey, you're ready to work with me on a regular basis"? Identify these three things. Is it kind of do you have that sort of mantra that you advocate pretty widely?
I really don't, and I'll tell you why. I understand where you're coming from, and I've been down that road, and I. Here's the funny thing: it's kind of a paradox because I agree with you, right? However, I don't really have the parameters, whether it be that work-life balance, burnout, et cetera, et cetera. I can't set those parameters in terms of somebody's personal uh, their personal architecture. Let me give you an example. If I'm dealing with a CEO who's a total workaholic, he is obsessed with his work, he is working, he's expecting his employees to work around the clock, to be ready to answer a phone call at 2 a.m., which I've worked with those individuals. Here's the thing: I'm not saying that's healthy or necessarily good, but it is actually a part of who he is. Now, what's interesting about this is that he is going to draw, when we clarify that, I'm not saying it's great, but that is who he is. And there are people that match that life. There are people that desire that crave that as well. And so by drawing that out, and I'm able to sit there and say, like, hey, let's maybe put some good parameters on, work-life balance and, things like this. And you really have to think about his expectations. What's going to happen, at least by defining that, is it's going to put the reality of what he's asking or what she is asking of people right square in the face. And then you're able to say, hey, let me ask you a question. You're paying this person X amount of dollars a year. Do you think that it's fair that they're available to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? Now that I see that, probably not. Okay, so one of two things either has to happen: A, your expectations have to shift, or B, you're going to have to give them some monetary compensation to be able to live in that way, right? And so it does help iron out in that way. But more oftentimes than not, what happens is, regardless of work life balance, health, unhealth, that culture is going to draw people that agree with that authentic culture from that owner
Sure.
to them. And so, really, those things kind of iron themselves out. My job is to really help identify, to mine, I would say, mine that owner's genius. What are those core components of who they are? And then, really, what I say is, look, now that we have these identified, people call them whatever. I call it personal architecture. Some people call them core, some people call them core values, whatever they are. Here's my thing: it's a box of 4 or 5 words at most that really identify who you are at your core. If you do anything outside of those values, out of that personal architecture, number one, you're not going to be personally fulfilled, even if it means more money. You're not going to be personally fulfilled. You're not going to like the results, even if the results are good, because that's not true to who you are. And so the better I can help clarify that for them, it acts as a filter for every business decision that they make, whether they're hiring, whether they're firing, whether it's increase, whether it's scaling, whether it's backing off. That filter, which is the personal architecture, really helps all of that. Does that make
Got
sense?
it. It makes total sense. Um, Cool. All right. So as we wrap it up, are there three main takeaways that you would tell any business owner or CEO to be mindful of as they look to shape their culture?
Yeah, number one, I would say, unless you have been intentional about your culture and your personal architecture, you might not have the right, you might not have the right culture and the right personal architecture. If that's the case, then you are missing massive areas of profitability. You're also missing what I call an emotional ROI from your employees, and it really could be one of the main reasons you're experiencing such large turnover. Um, Number two, I would say in terms of your work-life balance, what you talked about, which I believe is massively important, by the way, for not burning out over time. um, Identifying who you truly are as an owner, your decision making process, the space that you need to make decisions, whether it's quick, whether it's slow, whether it's uber slow, right? All those things, identifying, taking the time to walk through this process is going to help your work life balance. And then number three, I would say retention. Retention is massive, and there's some other spaces like that where businesses are hemorrhaging and they've just thought this is the way it is. Like the food service industry, we've just accepted that it's massive turnover. But here's the deal: there doesn't have to be. Well, you don't understand. I'm working with high schoolers. I'm working with young college. I'm working with this person, that person. It doesn't matter. When you're able to walk through personal architecture, when you're able to identify and clarify a true culture, what happens is, regardless of age, regardless of any type of demographic that you might throw up there, it's going to resonate, drop the right people in, push the wrong people out, and then, we can stop that hemorrhaging from taking place.
Beautiful. Travis, tons of value in this, man. I appreciate all your time today. Where can people find you?
So primarily right now, I'd shoot me an email. We're at wolfandironcompany@gmail.com. I'm on LinkedIn all the time. Right now, we're going through a rebrand on all of our websites, getting ready to publish a book coming out this fall. But classically, you can find me at www.wolfandiron.co.
Awesome. Travis, thanks so much for the time today. I'll
Thanks,
see you
John.
around. All right, see ya.